We're back with our political panel. Joining us now is Wall Street Journal columnist and CBS News contributor Peggy Noonan. Mark Halpern of Bloomberg Politics is here. Plus, we're joined by Democratic strategist and CNN political contributor Maria Cardona and Republican strategist Kevin Madden, who is a CNN political commentator. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you.
Peggy, I want to start with you. What is worse for the Republicans running the Congress? That they look like they can't govern, or that they disappoint their grassroots who wants them to take on the president?
Oh, that is a complicated question. That's why this question keeps continuing for the past few years. If you take a look at the Republican leaders of the Congress, I think you can probably fault them for not being able to control their own conference and control the situation, but you cannot fault them for failing to control the dynamics behind the whole thing. The fact is, there are about 50 or 60 Republican members who are very skeptical and really in opposition to what they see as de facto amnesty in the United States. They are a small group of the Republican conference, and yet they represent probably the thinking of almost half the country. And they do not really trust the elites of the parties or the elites of America's financial community to come through and address their concerns. So I see this whole split and tension as something that will likely continue and be very difficult for Mr. Boehner.
Kevin, you worked for Mr. Boehner. What's he got to do to get these guys in line?
Well, look, I think the question that you raised about whether or not governing or just voting no, I think is a big test. I think that's one of the big problems that John faces, that the Speaker faces up on Capitol Hill right now, is that you have about 50 votes up there, 50 members that have defined the test of conservatism around voting against this president or voting no on bills. And I think that's the wrong message to take from the last election. So many of these members came to Congress because they said, look, I'm going to go to Washington and challenge the status quo, but I'm also going to show that the institution can work again. And that was the message that both Speaker Boehner and then Minority Leader McConnell, when they came out after that election, that's the argument that they made, which is that we're going to demonstrate we can govern. So the big challenge, again, that John Boehner has is that he has to go out there and demonstrate the benefits from the American people and for the Republican brand of governing versus having these, one crisis after the next up on Capitol Hill. That's not going to help Republicans.
The midterms end, Republicans have a big win, and the president has shown he has a second act since then. The president's been on the offensive since the midterms. John Boehner and Mitch McConnell need a second act, because what happened on Friday will happen again and again if they don't figure out a new way to go. The balance you asked Peggy about, impossible to solve in the abstract. But case by case, Barbara Boxer and Bernie Sanders, they don't have a full veto power. But if Democrats are willing to obstruct in the Senate, you don't have to pass something that John Boehner and Barbara Boxer were both before, but close to it.
But here's where I think you can fault the Republican leadership. Kevin's right. After the midterm election, they came out and very eloquently talked about how now Republicans who are both in power are going to demonstrate how they can govern, are going to demonstrate how they're going to put the issues that are important to the American people first. They had to have known when they said those words, especially with additional members of a conservative caucus, what it would take to actually make those words a reality. So they either were deluding themselves or they were being deeply dishonest with the American people, because they knew when they said, we're going to demonstrate that we're going to govern, that that was going to mean negotiation and compromise, which is absolutely anathema to that conservative caucus.
But Maria, the Democrats seem quite happy to have this crack up and seem to be in a posture to not really deal with anybody. So how does that affect it?
I wouldn't say happy about it. I would say that Democrats are underscoring the message that they have said, frankly, for a very long time, that the conservative ideologues in John Boehner's caucus are a problem because they're not interested in governing. And so what Democrats are using this is to underscore that they are not even willing to put the funding of DHS at a moment when we need it the most first, as opposed to some ideologues who are trying to prove a point because they don't like something that the president did.
I'm going to switch now to the Conservative Political Action Conference, which was here this week, where a lot of